Hello everyone out there, and welcome to a presentation of some of the words you need to know when you want to talk about South Africa. The purpose of this short sequence is to learn some important words in a South African glossary. South Africa, as you can see, is a both very beautiful country but also with a horrible history behind it. And we are going to cover both sides in this short presentation of some of the words that could be useful when you want to say something and learn something about South Africa. So, the purpose is glossary training. We're going to do it in English, but I hope you can understand the words. These words has to do with history, because to know something about a country, you need to know something about the past, the present, and the future. In the beginning, we can always say that some people in a country, they are the original people, the people who were there first. In Australia, we talk about the Aboriginals. In America, we talk about the Indians or the Native Americans. In Greenland, we can talk about the Eskimos and so on. In South Africa, there were two people there first. They were called the Khoi and the San people. But then, as many places around the world has experienced, the Europeans came. First, the Dutch people came, people from the Netherlands. They sailed there, of course, and they settled because it was a nice country where they could be farmers. Then some English people came as well, and slowly the conflict between the Dutch people and the English people sort of got worse and worse, and it ended in a war. It's called the Boer War because the Dutch word for a farmer is a boer. You know, from Danish we have the Danish word bonde, and it's the same word. A boer is a farmer. And the Boers, they wanted to farm the land, and the English, they first of all wanted to control the land so they could sail and use it for trade. The English had better weapons and better soldiers than the Dutch, so they won the war, and in that way they gained control of most of the country. But it was a conflict, and it sort of, defined the country in the beginning. When you want to say something about conflicts, perhaps you can read about the Boer War. You need some of these words: to kill, to explore, to conquer. If you take over a country, you conquer the country. To defeat, if you lose the war, then you suffer defeat. To attack, you know that word perhaps. And if someone attacks you, you have to try to defend yourself. In any conflict, perhaps there will be a loser, so you can lose. There could also be a winner. You can win, to lose or to win. Anyway, a conflict or a war like this will always lead to things being split up in two, you could say. South Africa is a rich country, that's why I brought the picture here, filled with gold and diamonds. So it's a great country, a beautiful country in many ways. Those were a few words about the historical background, but what we have studied mostly in class is a special system that the government decided to have. They called the system the apartheid system. It was a decision made by the white people, and in the government we only had white people. And if you live in a democracy where the majority, the most people should decide, you can see that that is not really fair, because only 13% of the people in South Africa were white, and 87% were black or colored people. So the white people, they oppressed the black people. They had all the power, they made the decision, and they made this system called the apartheid system. The apartheid system is a system based on racism, that you should keep the races apart. So you could say that racism could be defined as discrimination due to skin color. Who you were and what rights you have and what laws you had to obey, that was decided by your skin color. So the idea of the apartheid system was to make different colors live in separate areas. We can see that in the picture. We have a black man sitting on the beach, and the beach is divided in two sections. A section for white people where black people were not allowed to go. The system lasted for many, many years, but then the system changed. People felt encouraged to do something about it because they felt it was unfair. And the world put pressure on South Africa in different ways. Perhaps you can study a bit more about that. So finally, in 1994, there was what we understand as a democratic election. So everyone could now vote, no matter what skin color you had. So now they had democracy, and the winner of the election was the ANC, the African National Congress. They chose a special man to be their president, a special man whose middle name, Rolihlahla, actually means troublemaker. So that's a bit funny. He really turned out to be a troublemaker. You know him as Nelson Mandela. He was the son of a chief, so he was born, and his father was a chief of his tribe. Here we have him in the picture. Nelson Mandela decided to protest against the apartheid system. He did that in different ways. In the beginning, he did it without violence. You could say that he believed in non-violence. He was a non-violent man. But then, because that didn't seem to help, he turned to trying to protest with more violent means. And that's why the government captured him, and they sent him to prison, and they sentenced him lifetime imprisonment. It means you have to stay in prison for life. But after 27 years in prison, he was released, he was set free. And the strange thing about this man is that he did not want revenge. He did not want to pay back. He showed forgiveness. He wanted to forgive people. He had been in prison for many years, but he was not bitter. He was not filled with hatred. He came out and he said, now we have to heal the wounds of what has happened to this country. If you have been hurt, well, you have a wound, and you have to heal these wounds. So he decided to make something special, and perhaps you can read about that more. The TRC is short for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was a group of people who, when Mandela became president, tried to find out the truth about the past so people could hear what had really happened, and then perhaps they could reconcile. They could meet each other and forgive each other. Today, South Africa is known for many things, but if you're a tourist, if you go there and your purpose of your trip is tourism, well, perhaps you will see some beautiful landscape. Perhaps you will see some of the big stadiums where they played the World Cup, because South Africa hosted the World Cup not so long time ago. Perhaps you'll also go to Robben Island. That's the place where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for many years. So you could make many historical trips in South Africa, but one of the things you would really have to do was, of course, to see some of the animal life. Perhaps you could see the Big Five. The Big Five is some of the special animals. You could see elephant, lion, rhinoceros, hippopotamus, and so on. In the picture you can see how close you can get to the wildlife in South Africa. Final slide is a slide about South Africa today. Today we sometimes call the nation the Rainbow Nation because the population is put together with a lot of different colors. That's why the Rainbow Nation. It's still a rich country when it comes to natural resources. It's still a country trying to create equality. They have the right to vote, but there's a lot of poverty. Some people are very, very rich and some people are very, very poor. They're also trying to create better possibilities to get an education. They are facing a lot of social problems. One of the social problems could be, how do we share the wealth? How do we share the money? How do we share the land? How do we create a smaller gap between rich and poor? It's also a country where tribal conflicts can pop up now and then. Different tribes, the Zulus, the Xhosas, there are different traditions, and sometimes there's a conflict between these tribes. But in many ways. It's a great story about a rainbow nation trying to live together in harmony, in spite of differences and in spite of different colors. I hope you understood some of these words. Anyway, you've now heard how to say them, and perhaps going through the slides, you can do that once more, and then you will see that South Africa is both beautiful and has a horrible background. Thank you for listening.